McLaren's Lando Norris is a fantastic driver, but Lando Norris doesn't agree with me. Lando has been at the heart of McLaren's turnaround this season, taking a car that managed just 14 points in the first 5 races and turning it into a consistent podium challenger. He's looking ever closer to his first win in Formula 1, and yet, despite managing 6 P2 finishes this season, he has been caught on the radio multiple times recently being incredibly self-critical. Let's explore what's led to his sour attitude, how his teammates haven't helped, and if he's ready to battle for a world championship. Lando Norris has been one of the best drivers on the Formula 1 grid for the last 3 seasons, in my opinion. He hasn't always had the best of cars, but what he has been able to do more often than not is deliver the best possible finish and put in some stunning performances. There has, though, been one thing missing from his impressive start to his Formula 1 career: a win, and the fact that that win still hasn't happened has seemingly started to take its toll on Lando, with many noticing over the last few weeks that Lando hasn't been his regular happy self. Of course, the main factor as to why he hasn't won is Max Verstappen. Lando Norris has been at his best, whilst Max Verstappen has also been at his best, but Max is in a Red Bull, and Norris can't do much about the fact that Max has set about breaking every Formula 1 record that exists over the last 2 seasons, meaning only Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz and George Russell have won a race other than Max Verstappen in the last 2 years, and you'll notice that all of those race for one of the established top 3 teams. Which is why it's so impressive that Norris has been closest to winning outside of the big 3. Norris has been on the podium 7 times this year, the overwhelming majority being second place finishes, leading to the most points that he's ever scored in a Formula 1 season, and on top of that, considering he may as well have not taken part until around 9 races into the season, that is absolutely amazing. However, the positivity of being an almost winner can very quickly start to turn into, well, why am I not winning? And we have noticed that turn in mentality over the last few weekends. In Qatar and Mexico, we saw him being incredibly hard on himself after mistakes, whilst in Brazil, I would argue that the team let him down. Over the radio, he discussed how he feels so shit sometimes, then in the media pen saying that he couldn't get the car where he wanted it to be because he has a lack of talent. In Mexico, he was uncharacteristically blunt during his post-qualifying interview and pretty gutted post-Brazil qualifying as well, again calling himself shit on the radio. He was taken aback by the fact that he made a mistake in the sprint qualifying in Brazil again, but managed to still be quickest overall. However, that frustration probably is justified because the mistakes from him in Qatar and Mexico came on weekends where the McLaren was quick and wins were possible. The mistake that he made in Qatar quali by breaking the track limits multiple times meant instead of starting in 2nd, he was starting in 10th, and again couldn't battle with those guys right at the top because he had to fight his way through the pack, even though the McLaren had excellent pace, which we saw in the Qatar sprint. Then in Mexico, similar, made an error, couldn't make up for it because Fernando Alonso caused that yellow flag, and then had a frustratingly incredible race where, again, he probably had the best pace of anybody, but was starting at the back of the pack. Whilst in Brazil, he was the fastest in qualifying overall again. If you look at the individual sector times, he should have been right up there. Lando said himself that he should have been on pole, but he started down in 6th because he went out as the rain started to trickle down. And again, we see in the sprint how good it could have been, but it wasn't quite. And in every single one of these occasions, he's letting Max Verstappen just start that little bit too far ahead of him to really challenge Max. It just makes me think that on all 3 occasions, had he qualified better and maybe started ahead of Max Verstappen, he may have been able to chase down a win because he would have had that very marginal advantage. And you can tell from Lando Norris's interviews, as with any Formula 1 driver, that that first win always means so much. It's career defining because it puts you in an elite club above what is already an elite club of getting into Formula 1. It shows that you can win Grand Prix, and it also means you can say to yourself, I've done it once, I can do it before. You have that confidence in yourself, and that confidence breeds even more success. I've said it about Red Bull this year. They got to this point of dominance because when things are going well, even bad decisions seem to go in your favor. I by no means agree with Lando Norris when he says he has a lack of talent. I think he is absolutely phenomenal, but it's starting to form a pattern that Lando won't be happy about. The amount of what if this or what if that discussions around Lando Norris is growing. I mean, it was always going to be what if he pit in Russia 2021, but now it's what if he hadn't crashed in Imola or Spa? What if he'd qualified better in Qatar or Mexico this season, or in Monza in the past as well? This list is damning because it shows how close he has been to taking that final step without actually being able to take it, especially as Lando Norris has now equaled the record for the most podiums without a win in Formula 1. which is now even more frustrating, especially considering how well his teammate is doing. Piastri came into this season under a lot of pressure. He was one of the hottest prospects that hadn't yet made it onto the Formula 1 grid, a Formula 3 champion in 2020. He then backed that up by being Formula 2 champion in his rookie season the year after in 2021, and that kind of performance is difficult to ignore, and it felt like he was set to rocket onto the Formula 1 grid, which, as we all know, led to a year as being a test driver at Alpine, and he left Alpine under, let's say, controversial circumstances. I can't remember the last time a rookie had the chance to turn down a Formula 1 seat, but it definitely doesn't happen often. So not only did he have the pressure to perform because of his junior career achievements, but now had the pressure to prove that he was right to turn down that Alpine seat and move over to what at the time was their main competitor in McLaren. But I do think it's fair to say that he has justified that move over to the McLaren team, and he has been an absolutely brilliant rookie to have on the Formula 1 grid. And I mean, if you look at the rookies in recent years, they haven't been great. Nick De Vries was awful. Logan Sargent hasn't been that much better, really. Zhou Guanyu is all right, but not great. Same with Yuki Tsunoda. I think he's good, but not championship contender someday. Nikita Mazepin was, well, Mazepin. What I'm trying to say is that Oscar Piastri is certainly the best rookie that we've seen since 2019, when who else but Lando Norris came through with George Russell and Alex Albon. But the difference is Lando Norris didn't come through as a Formula 2 champion. So both of them are still incredibly young. They're both very early on in their Formula 1 careers. They can both be seen as the most exciting rookies to have come through in recent seasons, and they're definitely the most exciting driver pair on the grid right now. I know that's slightly biased in that I'm a McLaren fan, but I just think both of these drivers are already so good, and neither of them are anywhere near their peak yet. So who knows where the ceiling for these two might be, but at this moment in time, Lando has to be seen as the guiding force for the team. Piastri is still learning a lot every weekend, whereas Norris is closer to fine-tuning those talents, and that's why the weight of the team is on him to deliver more often than Oscar. And that's why Oscar getting a race win, okay, it's a sprint race win, and how much the drivers really care about those varies. Like, if you're Max Verstappen and win a sprint, he really isn't that bothered, but that's because he's used to winning and hates the sprint races. But what I'm trying to get at is it's now the second time Lando Norris has been beaten to a win by his teammate that he is overall outperforming. Lando was so much better than Ricciardo in 2021. Over the course of the 22 races that season, Lando managed to score 160 points to Daniel's 150. He beat him in qualifying 15 times to 7, and yet the Australian was the one that won that race in Monza. Lando Norris had to fit in just behind. He ended up having to play the team game and wasn't allowed that chance to really run at Ricciardo, who, let's face it, he probably would have beaten to that victory. The fact that the Monza race was the only race that really opened up and it fell to Daniel Ricciardo is beyond frustrating for Lando Norris, because he was so much faster than his teammate, to the extent he was so much faster again in 2022, they fired Daniel Ricciardo. However, that does lead me to think of the one major difference this time around with Oscar Piastri instead of Daniel Ricciardo, and that's that there's a real case for Oscar Piastri getting on par, if not overtaking Lando Norris in the next few seasons. Oscar's rookie season has been wonderful to watch. As I said before, he is one of the hottest prospects in Formula 1 for really good reason, and he seems to already have that perfect mentality ready for Formula 1, as he's always looking to improve rather than blame things that go against him. And of course, he's had his ups and downs this year, but comparatively to those other recent rookies that I mentioned as well, he is a massive level up. Of course, Lando still has the belief from everyone inside the McLaren team. He came in as their guy at a tricky time. They were transitioning for a horrible part of their history, but he's always been striving to push the team forwards, even with the poor balance of that car, often categorized as the DNA of that McLaren package. He's helped them to progress through that and get past that. And the frustration is there, of course. He's competitive, he wants to win, and McLaren hasn't been able to deliver him that yet, but he's always been supportive of them and wanting to learn. Even at the start of this year, when it looked like an absolute disaster, everything we heard from the team was positive in terms of Lando Norris. Okay, we saw the frustration there, but again, it's how the team perceives him, and he's gained the respect and authority inside that team, and overall, I think the McLaren setup know that he improves them. And then on the reverse, they can see that he continues to improve every year, which is not easy to do. A lot of drivers go through ups and downs in their career, and of course there have been weekends where Norris hasn't impressed as much as expected. I've touched on many of them earlier on in this video, but if you look at his career overall and break it up into 5 or 10 race segments, he looks better and better and better each time, and there's never been a point where his progress has really slowed up that much or seemed to plateau. Like, a lot of drivers hit their ceiling and that's it, whereas Lando Norris, it still feels like he's got more to come. Every single opportunity he has to improve his driving is taken, so McLaren are able to say that as much they're getting the best out of Lando Norris, they're also nurturing his talent to this incredible level. For me personally, this year his racecraft within that McLaren car has improved dramatically over the course of this season, which is not the case for quite a few other drivers on the grid. I mean, Andrea Stella said that his attention to detail during the races is incredible. He holds onto tyres so much better than he has in the past now, but he also knows exactly when to go for a move, and whenever he does go for a move, I just assume that he's going to make it stick more often than not. And also he knows when to not go for a move, not to dive in and risk a front wing. Mexico, he ducks out after the red flag. He lost a lot of progress that he'd already made, which must have been really annoying to have to do again, but it shows that patience rather than getting into an unnecessary incident, and is starting to be appreciated by many others up and down the Formula 1 grid. There's a reason that he's the first choice to replace Sergio Perez in that second Red Bull seat in so many people's minds, and the biggest thing for me is that Andrea Stella, who's worked with Fernando Alonso, Kimi Raikkonen, Michael Schumacher, has said that he's started to see aspects of what made them champions coming together in Lando Norris in this 2023 season. Like, as soon as he had the car to deliver podiums this season, he was right there, and he's been there ever since. As soon as he has a car that is properly able to battle for wins regularly, if he can get over this blip in qualifying performance that we're seeing right now, why wouldn't he be able to do that too? Which means he has to be patient. It will eventually come to him. I know that's so much easier said than done, especially when you've seen both of your teammates celebrate wins in one way or another, especially when you've been better than both of those teammates overall by a considerable margin, as well as drivers like Russell and Leclerc, who you came through with, also picking up wins in Formula 1 before you, but he has nothing to be worried about. Even if he's being self-critical right now, he is one of the strongest drivers on the Formula 1 grid. He has been for the last few seasons, and is still getting better every year where others aren't. He now has a team behind him that looks to be moving in the right direction, is investing in the right things at the right times, and the jump that McLaren have made this year, obviously the question is whether they can continue that trajectory into 2024. If they do, Lando will be at the heart of it. If anything, I see this slight turbulence in his career as a learning point. All drivers are going to face criticism at some point or another. All drivers are going to be self-critical and have doubts about what they can achieve in Formula 1. They are competitors to their core. They will do anything to improve by even the smallest of margins. But going through this makes me believe that Lando will be even better next season, and I think the first win is closer than it has ever been. The McLarens look ready to break into that top 3 by displacing Mercedes or Ferrari, and Lando Norris looks next to break into that Formula 1 winners club. But I'd absolutely love to know your thoughts on Lando Norris so far this season and what you think he has ahead of him in 2024 down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, I also made this video here which goes through some of your hottest takes from the Brazilian Grand Prix. So click that link and I'll see you over there.